Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alexander D. Tucci Holloway, and this is Vulnerability Assessment of Michael Grant's Systems. This is ISA 4220 KSU Fall Semester 2019. So we're going over the vulnerability assessment of Michael Grant's systems. This is a report, and first we'll start with the executive summary. This is a report that provides an analysis of Michael Grant's Windows Server and Linux Server. This document will be listing all services that have or have not been implanted and installed, and going over any vulnerabilities that have been detected. Each section will be broken down into the service, any issues found, details of findings, and any recommendations and fixes that are available. This document will also have screenshots and a copy of the most recent checklist associated with mgrant 25's Windows and Linux servers. To determine which services are active on each server, we use certain commands that we input into the command prompt, which will then scan the system for the services associated with that command. One example is the nmap scan, which we use for Windows Server, which allows the IP address and the state of services installed. We can also use an nmap scan on the Linux server, which lists the IP addresses and the state of required services. On the Linux server, we use the sudo iptables-l command as a way to verify the firewall's input chain and any rules that have been set up. The last command we use is the sudo aa status, which verifies the status of the AppArmor service on the Linux system. To determine the functionality and vulnerabilities of the service, the Greenbone vulnerability server was used. This functions virtually the same as a Nessus scanner, as it is a fork of an open source OpenVAS vulnerability server. Once configured, it scans the two servers and it first summarizes the results found. Then it reports and describes any issues found for each host. In the filter report, there were 0 vulnerabilities found for each host. This, along with the checklist scans, shows that mgrant 25's Windows Server was set up and hardened per the instructions. This also shows that the Greenbone scan and services checklist that mgrant 25's Linux server was also set to specifications. As stated before, this was a filtered Greenbone vulnerability scan that has its limitations. For example, this might not show all issues that may be detected on the servers. It only lists the hosts that have issues. The threat level log issues are not shown in the report. Any issues that have a debug threat are not listed, and issues that have false positive threats levels are also not listed. Finally, any results that have a minimum QOD of 70 are listed. Checklist of services. For the checklist of services, we used a diagram that we could list the services along with the applications and state whether the services and applications were installed and properly running. To the right is a picture of the services checklist. For the Windows server, we configured the firewall service through the Windows Firewall GUI, and then configured HTTPS, SMTPS, and DNS all in the IIS GUI. For the Linux server, we configured the firewall service with iptables, installed AppArmor. The HTTPS service was configured through Apache. The POP3 service and the IMAP service was configured through Dovecot, and the SMTPS service was set up using Postfix, and the DNS service was set up using Bind. The last Linux service was SSH, which was configured with OpenSSH. As you can see, the Windows server came back as yes for firewall, yes HTTPS, yes SMTPS, and yes DNS. Same with the Linux server. As you can see, all services and applications were up and running. Technical summary. The technical summary is a summary of the Greenbone scan according to the filtered Greenbone vulnerability scanner. There were 0 vulnerabilities for each host. There were 0 high-ranking vulnerabilities found. There were 0 medium-ranking vulnerabilities found. And there were 0 low-ranking vulnerabilities found. Greenbone scan results. Once again, this is the summary of the Greenbone scan results. It lists the task or the scan was mgrant25 partner. This was the scan setup for the partner to be able to log in onto mgrant systems and scan the Windows and Linux systems. It states what time and which time zone the scan was conducted and when the scan ended. It also explains that the first part of the report that it summarizes the results that were found and then explains any issues that were found for each host. This part of the scan shows that there were 2 results per host. This is a filtered report that shows that there are 0 high threats, 0 medium threats, and 0 low threats. It also lists that there are 0 logs and 0 false positive. It goes on to explain that it only lists the hosts in which issues are found. This is why under the host tab it lists 0 hosts. It also explains that in a filter report, threat levels of log, debug, and false positives are not shown, and that only a minimum QOD of 70 are shown. QOD stands for quality of detection, so any results with a score of lower than 70 are not included. Nmap scan results on the Linux server. This is the results of the Nmap scan of the Linux server with an IP address of 192.168.2.52 of the mgrant25 system. It shows the IP addresses and the services that are listed or services that are installed on the system. It shows all required services are active and in an open state. It also shows which ports the services are associated with. Nmap scan results for the Windows server. In this report, it shows the Nmap scan results for the Windows server that shows the IP addresses of 192.168.2.53 of mgrant25 systems. It shows that the required services have been configured and are in an open state, and it shows which port the services are associated with. So it shows the service, domain service, HTTPS service, and SMTPS service are all active. Linux firewall verification. This screenshot shows the sudo's iptables-l command, which is used to verify the Linux firewall. This shows the input chain, aka policy, has been set to drop. It also lists all the rules associated with the services that have been installed. The Linux AppArmor verification. This shows the sudo AA status command was used to verify the installation status of AppArmor. AppArmor is a MAC, or mandatory access control. This is a kernel LSM enhancement that combines certain programs to be able to use a limited set of resources. AppArmor is a module that is on the Linux kernel that has a set of files that are pre-programmed to allow an administrator to restrict certain programs. It can also allow or deny users access to the network, execute files, write and read commands. This result shows the AppArmor was properly installed and configured. Conclusion. In conclusion, after we have run the Greenbone scan, we can see that the filter report that there were 0 vulnerabilities found. After running the proper commands, we have screenshots of the required services and applications for both Windows Server and Linux Server. Since this is a filter report, there may be some vulnerabilities that are not listed. If there were any vulnerabilities that the scan detected, the Greenbone scan report would list all vulnerabilities and their severity. For this report, since there are 0 vulnerabilities detected and there will be 0 recommendations needed and 0 fixes needed. all services and applications are running and configured properly. The Greenbone Vulnerability Ranking Scale is based on CVSS, but it is applied in case there is no full CVSS base vector available. It ranks vulnerabilities based on severity ranging from a scale of 0.0 to 10.0. The lowest severity being 0.0, the highest severity being 10.0. From these numbers, they're categorized into class starting with none, low, medium, and high. These classes are subranges from the main number range. NVD classification is the most commonly used classification, and that it is the default classification used here in the Greenbone scan. And here are my references.